Hey, it's Kylie. A kit fail turned into this. 300 grams of pure zen. 1.4 million vibed with me. Can I pull it off? Let's find out. My assumption is that I put 30 grams too much sand in this. So I'm just going to go ahead and double the clay as well and bring it up to a giant 300 grams. And then I will proceed as normal to wet it and knead it and mold it into a ball. And then we will attempt to polish it and see if we can get it to a mirror-like finish. I've put a lot of work into figuring out this particular blend of clay. It was a lot of trial and error, but I finally got there in the end. And so now my core, after it's dried, is solid and it doesn't crack, which is something that I was experiencing a lot at the beginning of my journey. Here is our rolled and shaped core. It's looking really good, really round, feels firm, and I think it's going to dry up really nicely. Hey, that's good. I'm going to leave it to dry now for 24 hours and we'll come back and rough shape it. All right, so I'm going to wet shape it now using a little bit of water and a glass jar. I'm just going to rotate it on the surface until I have achieved a perfect sphere. This is important because if you don't spend the time doing this now, it's going to be really hard to polish and get that beautiful mirror-like finish in the end. So I do it for a while, get it nice and smooth, and then I go ahead and apply a sticky mud layer using the clay that I've scraped off, just so that our next process, which is adding the dry clay powder, it will stick really well to the surface and not chip and flake off later. This can get pretty messy, but we are playing with mud after all, so you can always wash up later. That's good and sticky now, so I need to make it smooth so that we're working with a nice even surface, but we still want it to be really sticky. This is going to be big and beautiful, so I'm going to add a pop of color, putting a little bit of bright red in here, and we'll see how it turns out. It won't turn out exactly how it looks when it's dry. After it gets polished up and loses some moisture, the color will change quite a lot, but it always is really fun when we add some nice color to it. So I am just going to rub in really, really well all this dry clay powder. Now this is going to be our shiny layer. Now it's just plain dry pure clay, and well, it's not pure, it's got the color mixed in with it, but this is what creates the shiny finish at the end. So I found it's really important to rub this in super well, and the more you rub it in, the easier it is to polish up at the end. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a sheen that's starting to appear just from me rubbing it with my palms. This is what we're looking for. It's a little bit rough, but we are going to press all of this dry clay in now with a shot glass. This is my tool of choice, and I find it is just a really easy and really effective way to really secure this clay in. So quickly just give it a swipe with a tiny bit of water just to get it all kind of fused together, and then we're just going to polish it dry with the shot glass for a while. I don't love the color, so I'm going to add a little bit of fuchsia pink to the mix and see what we end up with. Again, it's not going to be this pink, unfortunately, because this pink is gorgeous and I wish that it would be this pink, but it just simply won't. But I think it's going to be a much nicer cherry red than we had before. I am loving this color. Now I think it's going to turn out much nicer. And this giant 300 gram Dorodango feels amazing in my hand. It's really solid and substantial. So I'm really happy with this. I'm glad that I made the mistake, and I think that it might just be my new favorite size. Here is my favorite part, the slow, gentle polishing with a tiny little shot glass. This is where you really see the shine start to come out. It's a really delicate process, but it's quite satisfying to just watch as every time you rotate, a tiny bit more shininess comes out. So this, whilst it's really fun at this point, it's also quite nerve-wracking because it's just so delicate. And so if it's going to get ruined, it's going to be in this step. So I've always got to be really careful, and I'm always quite nervous, especially when it starts to get really shiny, because in the past, as soon as it got really shiny, I would go, oh, let's shine it some more and more and more. And then, yeah, I would ruin it. So exciting, but nerve-wracking at the same time. Pretty neat, hey? If this has piqued your curiosity so far, why not head to the link in my bio and you can go straight to the kits so you can make your very own, or there's also links to other information if you'd like to dive in deeper. Look how shiny that is. It looks gorgeous. I love the color. I love the size. So this 300 gram Dorodango, born from a mistake, has worked perfectly so far. But what will it do overnight? That's where the real test is. Are you ready for the reveal? Oh, that's not what I expected. It is very ugly, to be frank. So I am looking at the surface and thinking that this is due to too much moisture being trapped inside the Dorodango before I began rough shaping it. So if you remember earlier on, I asked you to remember this for later. So that Dorodango there, I should have noticed at the time, but I didn't. Not until I rewatched the video, but the surface of that Dorodango is very mottly and patchy. And what that tells me is there's still quite a lot of moisture inside of that core that's being released. Now, what I should have done is notice that and then waited another day or another 2 days until the surface was completely matte and a uniform color. Now, the reason that I think this has happened is because I overlooked the fact that this was twice the size of the normal Dorodango that I make, which obviously, it's easy to see now, would mean that it would need twice the drying time because there's twice the amount of moisture in it. So if I was to do this again, I would leave it to dry for probably 48 to 72 hours and see what it looked like before I went on to the rough shaping and polishing. Okay, so it is Tuesday, 2 days since I completed my 300 gram Dorodango. It was a little disappointing how it turned out, but I wanted to quickly show you what it looks like now that it's fully dried and I've given it another quick polish with my shot glass. It's not that gorgeous cherry red, but it is super, super shiny, which is amazing. The surface is quite blemished, like appearance wise, and I don't love that. So I am going to strip it back. I'm going to make a separate video of how I do that. I'll show you what it looks like once I'm completely done. It's about a week now since I originally did this. It's completely dry. I have stripped it back, which is basically just starting the polishing stage and the dry layers all over again. So I wet it, I get rid of the clay layer on top, and I just reapply it. So that's what I've done. This is me polishing it finally, and it's beautiful. The color looks really deep and lovely, and it reminds me a little bit of a Jasper sphere. So I think that overall, this 300 gram Dorodango was an absolute win. We ran into some struggles along the way, but we have overcome those and come out with a beautiful, shiny red Dorodango. Thanks for watching with me, guys. I'll see you next time.